Okay, wait a sec. This video was recorded in April of 2024. It is currently January of 2025. Lots has happened in my life since this was recorded, including but not limited to selling off most of my cars, moving my wife and I 10-ish hours away to a very different state, and scrapping maybe half of my PC collection, but only the lesser needed, less valuable items. That being said, the Jeep in this video has already been sold. I had done a large amount of work to it both mechanically and cosmetically, and it made the 10-hour drive to the new state flawlessly prior to me selling it up there in a much more advantageous market for a rust-free manual 4x4 Jeep. So, real quick, here's just a few before and after photos to see the subtle yet impactful differences that very simple reconditioning and attention to detail can make. Where? Got it. Hello and welcome to an actual video about cars. First one in a long time. Crazy, I know, whatever. Not gonna get into it. Today's video is going to be very simple. It's going to be about how to recondition, quote unquote, pretty much any used car, but kind of aiming for like the older used cars, like maybe early 2000s and older, mostly because the tips, tricks, ideas that I'm going to share with you work a little bit better on older used cars than like newer ones. Like if you went out and bought like a 2017 something, it might not benefit as much from doing these little things as something from 1997. So we're going to be looking at several things. I have for an example vehicle, I have a 1997 Jeep Cherokee outside, straight six, 5-speed, 4-wheel drive, 4-door, and that's pretty rough. It needs some help. So we're gonna look at several categories, basically diagnostics for mechanical, diagnostics for electrical, diagnostics for cosmetic, and potentially we're going to discuss points on how to modernize or kind of like refine certain features on an older car that most newer cars have, so it would kind of make an older car a little bit more convenient and livable. So we're going to discuss that later probably, but for now it's just going to be like how to identify certain particular mechanical things, what type of maintenance should you do, how to kind of fix like cosmetic stuff, be it like maybe clear coat problems or faded trim or whatever. We're definitely going to see that on this car, but the overall concept is the same. You can look for several characteristics that we're going to point out on this car on pretty much anything. So it will help you in the long run if you're looking at another different used car, or if you're interested in flipping cars and like what can you do to add value or maybe restore some lost value or add features or pretty much anything. So without further ado, we're going to go out there, have a look, see what we got going on, and we'll get into it. Going back and editing this video, I realized that the entire time I sounded like I'm out of breath, like I'm just struggling to breathe. And I'm super like self-conscious about that now. So I just want to say that it's because my dumbass was wearing a flannel and it was hot outside and I didn't think to take the flannel off. I don't know. I don't know why, but whatever. Okay, so here it is, the 97 Cherokee. The first thing you can do when you see a car, just literally look at it. Everything you can tell almost instantly just by staring at it. Condition of the paint, clear coat is no bueno in a lot of spots. Roof, hood, fenders, all messed up. Trim, faded, kind of weird. Little bit of damage, might be able to get that out with maybe a heat gun. Is the grill okay? Grill is cracked right there. It'll need plastic repair if you can, or just outright replacement. You can look at the headlight lenses, corner lamps, make sure nothing's cracked. This one, it may be functional, but the glass on it is broken, so we will be replacing that anyway. Again, with the clear coat. Now, this is actually paint that's gone, so that's cool. Trim on the doors is peeling. Yes, it is. Window trim, also peeling. Are the mirrors cracked? Doesn't look like it. Looks to be in good enough shape. Wheels and tires. Are the wheels and tires in good shape? All the wheels appear to be in good shape. They're just kind of dirty, although that might be a little messed up. Maybe consider repainting these. The tire's okay. Seems like it's got good tread. Run your hand over it, check for like feathering or cupping, chopping, any uneven tread wear, because that can also be an indication of the alignment. Taillights. Cracked lens. Water can get in, can make the inside look ugly. The water can also make bulbs burn out. This trim looks like it sucks. It's broken. Rear wiper, torn, need to replace. Another thing, here's a tip. Painting the wiper arms. That can actually make a huge difference. Doesn't seem like it would, but it does. See how they're kind of chalky, paint's faded, you can see the silver underneath it. Now just check this out. I painted this last year. It's in great shape. Still looks good. I painted the front ones as well. And like, it just makes such a difference. And it's super easy to do. You just take them off, you paint them, you put them back on. It's got a tow bar, and that's good. Exhaust pipe is there. That's good. Dents, dings. Looks like a little bit of a dent there. A couple dings. Very tiny dents. They could be PDR'd if you really care. Honestly, stuff like that, if you can only see it at certain angles, wouldn't really worry about it. Here's a good indicator. So this tire, the other ones don't look like it, but this tire does have some dry rotting in the tread, and it's going down between the tread. So this tire, and it's in the sidewall as well. We've got dry rotting in the sidewall. That's not cool. So this tire could probably stand to be replaced, but funny enough, the wheel is in pretty good shape. Another thing you can look at, glass. Glass is important. Windshields are expensive. This one looks okay. Aftermarket. The windshield does appear to be aftermarket. That is not Mopar Chrysler. That is XYG. This was last inspected in 2016 in Mississippi. Actual vehicle history, when you run the auto check, shows that it was registered in Tennessee just last year. So this was a recently running driving vehicle that someone did put on the road. Look at the other glass. Is it tinted? If it is tinted, you want to make sure that it's either factory tint or it's done well. Because if it's not done well, then it's going to be peeling, it's going to be faded, it's going to look ugly, and you're going to have to take into consideration either removing the tint or replacing the tint. So as far as the interior goes, that door binds up pretty good. And you see how much that pin is moving in that bracket? So this bracket needs to be replaced, and the door check itself needs to be replaced. Now, a lot of companies make these all in one. So it's like just the whole thing. You just unbolt here, here, and then unbolt there, there. You do have to take the door panel off to remove it from the inside, and you'll just slide the new one in. But Jeep is silly, so you have to buy all this stuff separate. I already have, but yeah, whatever. Door panel's loose. Looks like it's got clips. Oh, weird. Door panel is no longer loose. This is peeling, and that will need to be reattached. So you'll have to glue that back down. Seats. A little bit of a cut there, but honestly, it's a 97, so whatever. The seat fabric is actually in really good shape. Missing the trim that goes across here on the seat, but oh well. So it's functional. Driver's seat will fold forward, backward. Does it move? Yes. Okay, that's good. So seat tracks are okay. People can sit in it. Aftermarket radio, not factory. Check out the dash. Dash actually looks good. No cracks, no warps. That is loose. There's screws, so I bet someone tried to tighten that and they broke the plastic behind it. So that can be fixed if I just put some washers on those screws and try to put the screws back in. Not a big deal. Instrument cluster, that's important. Make sure all the lights come on and then go off. Radio works. Make sure your shifter boot is present. Your selector appears to be functional. E-brake, does the e-brake work? Parking brake, whatever. Let's see if it moves if I let it down. Yes, the vehicle did move, so the parking brake is holding tension, so that's good. Especially important for manual vehicles, not so much automatic. Since it's manual, you want to row through all the gears, make sure it just goes in. It does, good. Passenger seat, look at it, make sure it's good. Headliner, which is also a big deal in these Jeeps, but headliner is important in general. It's actually perfect. Sweet. Door locks, do they work? No, not really. So none of them seem to be unlocking. So that could be either a power issue or that switch. So fun fact, in the Cherokees, the door lock power stuff goes through the window and lock switch on the passenger door, not the driver door, even though the driver door is the master switch. It's literally routed to go through that. So replacing that switch will actually fix that. Seats, a little stained on the back on that one. It's kind of dirty. Carpets are stained. They'll need either dyed or extracted. They look pretty not good though, so they'll probably need dyed, to be honest. The back seat looks like it's in really good shape. All the seat belts appear to be present. That's another thing. You want to make sure all your seatbelt buckles work. I thought I had. Excuse me? What the f? Now it looks like the top of the back seat is a little rough. Don't know what's going on there. But cargo area also kind of stained. All the plastics are there. Nothing looks broken. Spare tire is present. Spare tires are big deals too. Want to make sure the shocks are functional, and they are. They're sustaining the weight. Shake it, it's not falling. Spare tire, it's there. Looks brand new, looks like it was never ridden on. Sometimes if you care, you can check the DOT. See when it was made, see if it's quote unquote expired. Back to the inside. Flip on the lights, hit your hazards. Make sure your running lights come on. They do. Turn signals, they do. Tag light, it does. Move to the front, side marker, turn signal, headlight, headlight, turn signal, side marker. Beautiful. Now, go ahead and start her up. There's something. Look out the mirror, see if there's smoke or anything that comes out on a cold start. Make sure your oil pressure is where it needs to be, your coolant temp. If it's a true cold start, this actually isn't. I drove this around earlier today. Coolant temp should be all the way down past this mark in one of these, but in general it should be at least 0, and it'll just slowly creep up. You also want to pay attention to how fast the vehicle warms up, because if it warms up too fast, you need to go under the hood and check the pressure on the hose, on the radiator hoses. Give them a good squeeze. If they're super tight, that's an indication that the head gasket could be bad. We've got good voltage, 14 volts. That's what you want. Fuel gauge doesn't give me a reason to think that it's wrong. The tachometer shows that the RPMs are sustaining at the correct amount. Speedometer showing 0 as it should, because we're not moving. Functional odometer, that's important. We'll check our HVAC functions, then we'll check our wipers. So it's turned off, silly me. So we'll put it on the face first. I got nothing. It's out of the defrost. Turn on the AC. Got a belt squeak. Yeah, okay. So it'll probably need a new serpentine belt, potentially tensioner. If it's another vehicle. On these, the tensioner is basically the power steering pump. Fog lights, that's something I forgot to mention. The fog lights, I know they don't work, so I'm not going to bother looking, but usually you turn your headlights on, then you turn your fog lights on and they'll come on. Make sure your headlights are not on their high beams, because if they're on their high beams, a lot of cars will automatically disable the fog lights. So we'll check the rear wiper, see if it's functional. It do. Front, they are. Very nice. We got a chip in the windshield. Now here's something. For the windshield chip, look at it closely and see if there's kind of like a film around it in the corners. That tells me that it's been filled. So that chip has been repaired, so there's no chance of it cracking. It's just kind of sort of in your line of sight, and that might be a little annoying, but that appears to have been repaired. So we'll go underneath the hood, and then we'll look underneath it afterwards. All right, you're under the hood. Look for oil leaks first. Looks like the valve cover gasket's leaking pretty good. It's got OEM wires. They may have never been changed. That is an aftermarket oil filter, so at least they changed the oil in it. Check the coolant reservoir. Pretty low, almost empty. Check the battery. Battery appears to be a few years old. I don't know about this wetness around it too much. I'm kind of inclined to believe that maybe some of the stuff is leaking out through the caps there, but it started up fine, I guess. Well, it was actually kind of a laggy start. Not a huge fan of that. So it very well could need a new battery. Terminals are a little corroded, a little dirty. It doesn't sound bad. It doesn't have any unusual ticks, knocks, nothing like that. It sounds pretty smooth. You want to look for sounds like, you want to listen for sounds like rattling, tapping, knocking, clicking, anything like that, because all of those are indicators of different potential mechanical issues. One thing you can do, you can pull the oil cap, put your hand over it to check for blow-by. There doesn't really appear to be any. My hand is clean, so it's not spitting oil out at me. Blow-by is just when your piston rings are wearing, and so combustion gases are getting through into the crankcase and not staying in the combustion chamber where they belong. So, judging by the oil around the valve cover, you are going to want to replace the valve cover gasket before it gets too bad. But everything appears to be in okay shape. Although I do kind of hear almost like an exhaust leak. And when I put my hand around this very front pipe, I can feel hot puffs of air, which means that this manifold is leaking. So the exhaust manifold here may need replacing. But I don't hear any whines. I don't hear any like strange tapping. The belt squeal at idle with the AC off is not present. So this has been idling for a minute. The hose is still kind of cold. Not really any pressure built up on it. Radiator cap is a little warm to the touch. So it's doing its job. It's doing what it's supposed to. You do want to look at the brake fluid. For one, the color will tell you just how old the brake fluid is. If it's real dark, it should definitely be changed. Brake fluid is hydrophobic, so it will capture water, and when it holds water, it becomes less effective. Same thing with the clutch reservoir, you want to double check that. It's typically right here on the firewall next to the master cylinder for the brake. Look, just kind of shot out at me there. That's real dirty, real gross. So might want to flush that just because. It takes the exact same fluid more times than not that the brake system does, because it's, again, hydraulic. So everything seems to be okay. One thing we can do, we can look at it when it's off. So with the engine off, you look under your hood, inspect things, see if there's oil leaks. There are. Inspect the serpentine belt, have a look, see if it's glazed, which this one appears to be. Check your pulleys, make sure you don't have any damaged, bent, cracked pulleys, nothing like that. Which everything appears to be okay, but that belt doesn't seem to be like it's in very good condition. And if you look very carefully at the belt itself, see all those micro cracks and stuff? That's not good. They're only going to get worse, and then eventually they'll just break. So you do want to put a serpentine belt on a vehicle when you see micro cracks like that, or glazing or anything like that, because that will indicate that it's an old belt and it's probably ready to go. Another thing, look at the hood. See if there's anything splashed up on it. Like, this looks like mud. It is, it's dirt. But you want to look for things like dark spots, oily spots, in case oil blew up on the hood, any yellowish, orangish, weird sprays or anything like that that could indicate maybe coolant, maybe a hose ruptured, radiator ruptured, overheated, splashed coolant on the inside of the hood. Because a lot of people think to clean this, but they don't really think to clean that. Same thing with the firewall, they don't really pay much attention to that. This thing just looks like it's covered in dirt. So it doesn't look like there's been anything catastrophic recently that's happened under here. One thing you should do, I'm not gonna do it right now, but look at your air filter. Check for any oil. Check to see if it's caked up, if it's really dirty. Because if it is super dirty, there's a chance that some of that dirt eventually got into the engine. It's not mechanically sound to have dirt just flying into your motor. Before and after you run it, look underneath. Look for any obvious signs of leakage, any wet, dark spots, any caked up oil. You can also take this time to inspect the running gear to see if maybe the axle, if it's four-wheel drive, or if it has a live axle, not, or CV axles. Look for shredded CV axle boots, because that'll indicate that you might need to replace those axles soon. On most cars that are front wheel and all-wheel drive, you'll have CV axles like that. And those boots, if they tear or shred or rot away, that grease that's in the CV axles will just sling all over the place. It'll get super messy. In doing so, you lose your lubrication properties, which means the axle will wear out faster, it'll start clicking, it'll do stupid stuff, and eventually it might just come apart. So when you're underneath the vehicle, look at the frame, look at the wheel wells, look at all the metal. Make sure there's no rust or no excessive rust. You don't really want to see holes over here where important suspension components bolt onto frame rails. And now this is a unibody vehicle, which means that the frame and the body are one. In a lot of cases, that's what you're going to be dealing with. There are still some cars out there that are body on frame, which means the frame and the body are completely separate and the body is placed and bolted to the frame. A lot of trucks, pretty much all trucks, vans, that are built like that. Minivans are usually unibody. So rust is a little bit more detrimental to those. Unless, you know, body on frame, the rust is like through the frame, then you have an issue. But again, just with everything else, on this particular vehicle, it appears that everything's just covered in mud. So I do want to pressure wash the mud and make sure that there's nothing hidden underneath maybe there is rust that I can't see, or there's leaks that I can't see that the mud's caking up. Like in this corner of the oil pan here, I can see that it's dark, so it is oily, but again, it's also tan because of the mud. So, also inspect sway bar end links, bushings on your sway bars, bushings on your lower control arms. Just look. You don't really have to do too much, just look. If the boots are shredded, if there's like grease seeping out and the boots look like they're in bad shape, because you can have grease seeping out if it's a serviceable joint, and it will be perfectly fine. And by that I mean if there's a zerk fitting, also known as just like a grease fitting, you'll have a little nipple just like this, sometimes cleaner in silver, but just like this, and they're serviceable, which means you can put a grease gun up to it and pump these full of grease to extend the life of the joints so they don't wear out any faster than they should. Not seeing that on this particular vehicle, which is good, but I have PTSD from the last Jeep I bought, so I'm gonna put a track bar on this, because these track bars go bad and you'll feel popping in the floor, and you'll hear sometimes a click or a clank when you're turning. And the most detrimental one of all, when you're going down the road at 50 miles per hour or faster and you hit a bump, the whole thing starts shaking back and forth, and you got to slow all the way down almost to a complete stop to get rid of the what they call death wobble, and that's not a fun experience. Moving to the passenger side, you can lay up underneath and see everything still. Inspect the exhaust, check for a catalytic converter. It's there. No crackhead has taken it yet. And if they step to my property, well, it's a challenge for them. Again, no rust in the frame rails, which are just these things. Floor is solid. You can check around where there's floor drains. Sometimes these will be rubber grommets, and sometimes they'll just be metal tabs that pop in and out. Sometimes water will collect and it'll start to rot out from there and just get worse. Doesn't look like that's an issue here, which is good. Again, you got leaf springs in the back. Lots of cars have struts, like McPherson struts, so it's spring and shock combined into one, that go onto the axle or go onto whatever lower control arm or knuckle or what have you, depending on the manufacturer. So you want to inspect those and make sure the shocks aren't covered in oil from itself. Like you'll see, it'll be wet from here all the way down, and that can indicate that the shock is just bad. The seals have leaked, the oils come out, so it'll be more bouncy. It might make noise too. It's a very, very distinct sound, a shock going bad. It's a knocking sound in the floor, basically. Like you took a tennis ball and you just like bounced it on the floor a couple times. Sounds like that. You'll check to see if it's four-wheel drive, you'll look at the transfer case. If not, then you'll just look at the transmission itself. And that's, if it's rear-wheel drive. If it's front wheel or all-wheel, then it'll both be up there. If it's transverse anyway, you'll have just a power transfer unit or something up here that you'll want to look at. That's basically like a transfer case. It's just up front, a little bit smaller. Then you'll have a drive line coming through here, usually two-piece, and it'll go to the rear. The differential, which the differential is the differential. That's going to be pretty easy to tell. There's just this big pumpkin-looking thing there in the center, and you want to look at that too. Make sure that there's no fluid leaking out of that. Make sure it's dry. You want to look here where the drive shaft goes into it. Make sure that seal is dry. You're not losing diff fluid through there. And look at the transfer case. You're not losing diff or whatever fluid. Sometimes it's heavyweight, sometimes it's literally automatic transmission fluid. Just depends on the manufacturer, how they built it, whatever. Actually kind of looks like maybe this was resealed or rebuilt at some point, because I don't think this rubber looking black RTV stuff is standard on these. And that's a good indication to look for too. You want to see if maybe potentially work has already been done. See if maybe things have been replaced. Look at bolts, see if mounts have been turned. You can see pretty telling, I mean it's covered in mud, but you can look and see if there's wear on the bolts, and it'll usually be in both corners of the bolt. If it's going on and only on, then this side of the bolt will be worn, but if it's going on and off, and both sides of the bolt face will be worn. Same thing with nuts, obviously. And that'll tell you if something's been taken off or taken apart or whatever. Moving to the back side, bunch of mud. This is where a lot of dirt cakes up. This is also where rust likes to start, because especially in northern areas, that salt comes up through the front and the rear, and air pushes it up and behind the bumper and stuff. And it looks, again, doesn't look like there's rust. It's just super muddy on this thing. You got your tow hitch. Make sure the tow hitch is fastened to the vehicle correctly. And it looks like it is bolted into the frame rail under the mud somewhere. Fuel tank. Make sure the fuel tank doesn't have any cuts. Looks like there's a scrape on it. I'm not sure if this is actually the tank itself or if this is a plastic shield that goes over it. But either way, there's a scrape, but no leaks. A lot of the times fuel tanks are plastic, but sometimes they're metal. So you'll see like dents and stuff, especially on older vehicles, they're usually metal. But plastic is kind of the prevailing material. Check for wetness, make sure it's not leaking gasoline. Make sure you don't smell fuel, because sometimes the actual fuel pump seal, which goes on the top of the tank, can be what's leaking, and that fuel will kind of drip over the side and drip down. And so you want to look at all faces of the fuel tank. So look over there in the front, on the side, the back, the side. Make sure that no fuel's spilling over, because that can be an indication of where it's leaking as well, if it is leaking. And gas is pretty potent, so you'll be able to smell it. As for brakes, this has disc brakes in the front and drums in the rear. To inspect drum brakes without pulling the wheel, there's usually little rubber plugs or something. They're either circular or they look like this. Actually, that's what this is. They're little rectangles, roundish rectangles. And you can pop those out. So they typically look like this, or again, they can be circles. You're gonna peek in there. So you wanna look for two things. Basically, that backing right there on the right, which is the actual pad backing, and then all the material to the left is the pad itself of the shoe. That's the shoe lining. You want to make sure it's at least thick enough, like a couple millimeters or more. Drum brakes wear significantly slower than disc brakes. So if it's kind of thin, you might not need to worry about it. Now, checking the front, you usually can stare through the spokes. That's about what you want to see. It can be a little thinner, but you generally don't want it to be as thin as the actual pad metal itself. But that looks okay. Look at the rotor too. Look for any cracking, any glazing, which this rotor does appear to be a little glazed. You want to look for excess rust on the rotor itself, because rotors do rust and they will get some sort of flash rust on the faces, which is normal, especially if it's rained recently. But a lot of rust will indicate that the car has not been driven in a long time, which again gives you more questions to ask the seller. So all in all, that can be your quick little once over. Look at your wheels, look at your tires, look at the paint, look at the trim, look at the windows, look at the wipers, make sure the lights work, start it up, listen for bad noises, see if it struggles to start. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Now, as for this blowing out of the defrost, a lot of times in older cars, the HVAC is run off of vacuum, not necessarily electronic actuators that have a little motor that flip back and forth and move the arms and move the doors and whatever. On older cars, you're looking at vacuum issues. Now, I've already done a smoke test on this, which means that you take a machine that makes smoke and you hook it up into a vacuum line literally anywhere. Some cars have test points. This one has one on the passenger side. It's got a little nipple that comes up from a vacuum line that runs from the front to the back, which goes over and then into the firewall, whatever. Hooked it up to that. I got smoke coming out of this. So I know for sure that this control head needs to be replaced because it's losing vacuum literally at the switch. So when you're turning it, it makes different noises. It makes different sucking noises, like your mom, but it's not working like your mom. So I will need to replace this, because if it wasn't this, then it would be the arm from the vacuum actuator chamber thing. And either that could be broken, or the door inside the HVAC box behind the dashboard could be broken. And though that's a lot more of a rare instance, it can happen, and when it does, 9 times out of 10, you gotta take the entire dashboard out and then take the heater box out in order to replace that. And that sucks, and I've done it a lot, and I hate it, and I don't like doing it. So that should really do it for the overview. That's just kind of visual observations that you can make on a vehicle to see, without actually driving it, to see what kind of fun you might be in for. So there are ways to fix pretty much everything listed. Now, that depends on your experience and your tools and your budget. Anything can be fixed if you have the time, if you have the knowledge, if you have the money. A lot of these things require all three. It's not something that you should feel super worried about, I guess. Because again, and literally you can do anything. If you just like try to figure it out, don't give up. Don't just give a car to a shop and be like, here, take thousands from me. I don't want to figure it out myself. Don't do that. Be smart. Save your money. Look at people on YouTube. They've done it before, so that means you can. That's just how it works. That's the rule. That's the law. Now, as for things like maintenance, you can do a bunch of stuff. Now, as you can see, I've already done all my diag, and I've bought a bunch of stuff for this thing. The most obvious thing you can do is change your oil. I highly recommend you change your oil. I also highly recommend you get a factory oil filter. I don't care if it's a fancy brand like Wix or MicroGuard. I don't care if it sucks like Fram or the CarQuest. I don't care. I don't care. Factory. I don't even care if this is literally the exact same thing as something that says Wix on it. I don't care. Buy the box that says that it's from the manufacturer. That's literally all I've ever done, and I've never had an issue. I promise these are made just a little bit differently than the aftermarket counterparts. And I can tell you this from experience, because putting an aftermarket oil filter on a Hyundai or a Kia, even if it's made in the same factory and it has a different label on it, I promise that will make the engine run a little bit worse, and it will make noises happen that you didn't want to hear. I have literally seen it. I've taken off a brand new oil filter that was a CarQuest brand and put a Hyundai brand on it, and it stopped rattling. I don't know. That's just how it is. That's how it is. That's how it is. Deal with it. Something else I recommend, and I put this in literally everything, even my diesel truck out there. This brand, this additive, this ounce, this bottle, this company.
This.
The goal behind adding zinc to your oil is to cut down and hopefully eliminate pretty much any engine wear on the internal components. Your bearings will thank you. Your cams will thank you. And fun fact, if you have lifter tick in something like either that Z or the Jeep we just looked at, this will quiet that down. Just does. Now, for my older vehicles, I recommend this brand, this type of oil, this weight. Just put it in there. If it calls for 1030, put in 1030. If it calls for 1540, put in 1540. If it calls for 520, put in 520. Follow your manufacturer's specific oil weight, put it in. Don't worry about it. Actually, some of this stuff is for that car. So we're not gonna worry about it. Oil cap. So you saw that oil cap wouldn't tighten? Well, that's causing some oil to spray out from underneath the cap. Replace the oil cap. Simple, quick, easy. Plugs and wires, another big deal. So I know you're gonna see the brand and think I'm retarded, but listen, Champion spark plugs are the thing to put in a straight 6 Jeep, straight 4 Jeep, or any type of Hemi whatsoever. Champion is the way to go, and they have to be copper. They won't like the platinum, they won't like the iridium, it has to be copper. Now, I totally cheaped out on the spark plug wires. We'll see if that bites me in the ass. It may not, but it might. I usually recommend NGK, which is actually what I have here for the 240 behind me. But yeah, whatever. Now, modernization. Making something old kind of relevant. Some sort, doesn't have to be a touchscreen, but it probably will be, some sort of touchscreen radio with an Apple CarPlay or Android Auto programming behind it. Doesn't really matter what brand it is, as long as it works when you wire it up. This will literally bring any car into the 21st century, and it is so helpful, especially for this truck. For me, do a lot of things with it. It's super gross because it's on the road. That's what it does. It just goes on the road. It tows things. So the CB for me is necessary as well. Having Apple CarPlay for maps and music, because I'm very much a music person. It's super, super helpful. And it does not take very long, and it does not cost very much money. You'll have less than $100 in a head unit and your mounting hardware and whatnot, which, by the way, on this one, I actually had to trim with my Dremel the plastic in this bezel. And same thing with here. I cut out the pocket because this has a aftermarket trailer brake. This is where the factory one would go, but it didn't get it. So I cut out the entire pocket, and you can tell because that's ugly right there. I made an oopsie. I slid this into the dash, and then I've got the speaker. But I did have to trim this bezel in order to make it fit. So keep that in mind. If your vehicle isn't really, what the hell? If your vehicle isn't really meant to have a double din, either buy a 1.5 din or a single din, because they do make Apple CarPlay stuff for single dins. It looks a little funny, but the screen is smaller, but they make it. Or have a Dremel. Have a Dremel. Just cut stuff. If you're already doing stuff like this, you've probably seen a junkyard or two, and you've probably been to one, like a pick and pull or something. So you can always get more parts that you can mess up later on. So either get some junkyard parts, practice on those, or just be brave, tough it out, cut your own dash, and it'll probably work out. And funny enough, on this one, I did buy hardware to mount it, and I didn't need it. It just slid right on in there. And it's not going anywhere. So that's always an option. Other fun things you can do to really customize something and make it more modern, or just classy, sporty. Steering wheel. Let's put on a steering wheel. Shift knob. Bonus points if they match, and extra bonus points if the color scheme goes with the color scheme of the car. Some woods, which I just love a wood steering wheel, love a wood shift knob. Big wood guy. I love wood. Would recommend wood to contrast, but you don't have to. You can do like a nice leather wrapped wheel, 3-spoke, 4-spoke, what have you. I think 3 spokes look the best in my opinion. This is not a real Nardi. I'm cheap, but it looks so good. I've had it in the car for about a year. Same thing with the shift knob. Now the shift knob is legit. This guy actually put it on a lathe. He turned it and he glossed it with the acrylic stuff, whatever. I like it. It's good. But just stuff like that to kind of accent the interior. Floor mats that match the color of the carpet, but rubber, so they're robust and they don't get super dirty. And when they do get super dirty, super easy to clean. Just spray them off, take them outside, put them in the yard, spray them with a hose, hit them with some purple power, good to go. So that's kind of all there really is to it. I mean, for that Jeep specifically, I've also got this. It bonds to plastic. A lot of people said that the semi-gloss looks good on plastic trim because if you use satin, it fades and looks gross. And if you use like the flat, it'll get chalky. So I got that for the plastics. I did get this as well. This is the bezel that goes over the license plate. And I'm gonna paint that with this too, so it all matches. That's really all it is. I mean, it's just touching up the exterior, making sure everything on the exterior is in good working condition, because if it's in good working condition and it can be repainted or refinished or what have you, then you can just clean it, maybe hit it with some paint. Let me tell you, black paint makes an old car look new. So I just realized the the paint that I used on the Crown Vic that I had last, that I painted the wheels on, it looked really good, is the exact same paint that I bought for the plastics on the Jeep. So I've accidentally shilled for this company twice now. So in summary, in closing, you've seen how to inspect paint and plastics and glass. What kind of glass? Is it aftermarket? Has it been replaced before already? Is it tinted by factory? Is it tinted aftermarket? Is the tint in good shape? You've figured out mechanical things like noises, leaks, worn suspension, bad tires, low brake pads. Are the rotors good? Are they bad? How long has a car been sitting? You can tell by looking at the rotors. Things like that, like registration too, when was the last inspected. Get an auto check done. Get a Carfax done, whatever. Always look for guys who know a guy, because that guy will be able to do it for you for cheap. You just gotta find the guy, which is a good challenge. You've looked at the interior. Was the car completely trashed? Is the interior in good shape? Because sometimes that's an indicator of whether or not they took care of the car. If they keep it clean, or if it's just like standard wear, like it's dirty or it's old, but it's actually in pretty good shape underneath. And to be honest, this Jeep is. I mean, the headliner. Always look at the headliner. Like this one is perfect. So I think it's actually been replaced. And I say that because this is broken, and this, well, that was loose. It's not now. So I think it was replaced, which again is another indicator that someone cared about it. So aside from like generic repairs, like stick stuff back together, tape stuff back together, yeah, just look at stuff, listen to stuff, look for rust, look for leaks, look for damage. Just a couple silly tips about bringing a car into the 21st century, like putting a radio in it, especially one with Apple CarPlay, because man, that helps. Yeah, I mean, this is all like super simple stuff. It sounds like a lot because it's a lot to look for, and the more you look, the better you'll get at identifying when issues arise or when there's red flags to a vehicle. You'll figure it out. To clarify, inspection is step one, and in inspection, you have to be able to determine quick diagnosis of things as well. What needs repaired, what can be left alone, what needs cleaned. That's really all it is. That's the first step. I will try to make future videos on how to actually proceed with the identified needed repairs, and if there are hitches that come up, how to overcome those, if I'm able to actually, like, you know, stick to it and record stuff. So hopefully just this video on teaching identification of issues and inspection of condition, hopefully it's helpful. I hope it helps you with what to look for and listen for, and how daunting of a task it may be, whatever you identify, how big of a deal it's going to be to fix whatever you find, so you don't accidentally psych yourself out with a car that has a whole bunch of little things wrong with it, either cosmetically or mechanically, that you, in theory, could actually get done in a weekend. Don't let that scare you away from purchasing a vehicle that you would like, especially if it's a good deal. But you also need to know what the red flags are, because it could be a bad deal. So all in all, I hope that this is helpful, useful. I kind of like to talk a lot. I like to ramble a lot. So whoops. Hopefully this does something for you though, and aids you in your next car purchase, be it a daily or a project or a flip or what have you. Thank you if you've made it this far, which, you know, I'm not expecting everyone to, but if you have made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Leave me a like so I feel better about myself. And if I forgot something, remind me in the comments, ask me questions. And if there's things that I forgot that you look for, if you look for certain things on a regular basis that I didn't mention, put that in the comments too. That will be super helpful for someone else. And, you know, you can always subscribe. So hopefully, if I get around to making another one, you'll actually be there so you can see what follows the diagnostic process, what's supposed to come next. So hopefully I can actually keep to it and I can record that stuff for you guys. Thank you very much if you've made it this far in the video. Thank you very much for watching. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you, if I can keep to it, I'll see you in the next one.